John Cola with OKRaw.com. Today I have another exciting episode for you. We have a special guest, Dr. Dina over here. He's been into the raw foods diet for the last 27 years. You could learn more about him and his wife, Dr. Karin Dina's work at rawfoodeducation.com. I'm bringing them to you guys today for one very important reason, right? I want you guys to succeed on a plant-based raw foods diet. He's been doing it for a long time. He's also a nerd. He has his glasses on. But he researches a lot of stuff. And I mean, he knows the science. He knows the stuff. And that's why I brought him in today to share some important information with you guys. You know, you guys may know that, on a raw vegan diet, you're going to get probably all the nutrients you need. And, there's a few things that may come up. We all know that vitamin B12 may be deficient on a raw vegan diet, but also deficient in a standard American diet. Vitamin D, may be deficient on a raw vegan diet if you're not getting enough sun like you should be. And, there's a few other things, and we're going to talk about one of the major ones that's really important to me. It's the EFAs, or essential fatty acids. So let's get right into the questions with Dr. Rick. Dr. Rick, can you be deficient in essential fats on a raw vegan diet?
You could, depending on what raw vegan diets you choose to be in your diet. On an omnivorous diet, you could be deficient in essential fats, or you could be good in them. Any kind of diet, you could either be deficient or good, depending on what foods you choose. So there are two essential fats, only two. One of them is an omega-3 fat. It's called alpha-linolenic acid. The other is an omega-6 fat called linoleic acid. And most people out there are consuming way too many omega-6 fats. They tend to be pro-inflammatory, and they're found in most abundance in corn, cottonseed, and soybean oil, which is in processed foods. So most people are consuming way too many of those. It's causing inflammation in various parts of their body, blood vessels, joints, all over the place. And they're not getting enough omega-3 fats. Those help reduce inflammation and keep everything in control. Omega-3 fats help lower your triglycerides, lower your cholesterol, make your brain cells work right, make your hormones work right, and on and on and on. Have a whole huge array of benefits. And depending on the foods you choose, you can either be in good essential fat status or bad.
Rick, so what are some good sources of omega-3 fatty acids in a raw vegan diet?
All right, well, first of all, you've probably all heard of flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts, and those are good sources. Those are absolutely true, some better than others. And some of you, but not all of you, have probably heard that leafy green vegetables are excellent sources of omega-3s if you eat enough of them. Now the thing is, you need to eat a pretty good amount of leafy greens in order to get your daily supply of omega-3 fats. You need to eat maybe 150 or so calories worth of romaine lettuce, for example. That's 2 heads of romaine. Most people are not eating that quantities of greens in a month. Now, for those of us interested in raw food nutrition who want to base our diet based on fruits and vegetables, we eat a couple of big salads per day. We, wrap romaine leaves around our bananas and have banana sandwiches. We make some green smoothies. We make some juices so we can concentrate that stuff in. So for those of us eating a fruit and vegetable-based diet, it's not out of the question that we consume that quantity of greens. And you can get a lot of omega-3s just from doing that, which is great. Did you guys know that fruit contains omega-3s? Yes, it does. And non-green vegetables contain omega-3s as well. And I've analyzed many different diets just from fruits and vegetables. And you usually get 2 to 3 grams of alpha-linolenic acid per day, which more than covers your omega-3 needs for the day. So that's really cool.
So, Dr. Rick, if you want to really up your omega-3s, could you just start juicing greens? Because, some people might not eat 1.5 pounds of romaine or other greens a day, but if you juice 1.5 pounds, are you still getting all those omega-3s in there?
You are. And that's one of the benefits of juicing. I know some people are against juices. I think that's one good thing. You can concentrate a lot of greens into something that's consumable, that doesn't take you an hour to eat, because not everyone has an hour to eat all those greens every day. We have busy modern lives. Now, if you're not willing to consume that huge quantity of things, well, then there are flax seeds, which are extremely high in omega-3s. A close second is the chia seed. Those are really good. Hemp seeds are a reasonably good source of omega-3s. They have omega-6s and omega-3s in a pretty healthy ratio. So that's good. And then there's soybeans and walnuts. And those things, though, we're really starting to get higher in omega-6s compared to omega-3s.
So let's talk about that, Dr. Rick. You need the omega-3 to 6 balance and how important it is, because some people don't realize when they're eating almonds, right? It's a lot higher in omega-6s than 3s, and it's going to maybe potentially mess up your ratios, right?
That's true. So a healthy ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fats is from 4 to 1, that means 4 times more 6s and 3s, to about 1 to 1, even amounts of both, and some might even argue 1 to 2, twice as many 3s compared to 6s. So foods like almonds and olives and avocados, a lot of you heard, contain mostly monounsaturated fat, otherwise known in most cases as omega-9 fats. And they're relatively neutral from an inflammation point of view. So when people switch from corn, cottonseed, and soybean oil with a lot of omega-6s that's pro-inflammatory over to olive oil and almonds and avocados, well, they're cutting back on their omega-6s a lot because they're eating more omega-9s. That's good. But a lot of people don't realize, if you look at the fatty acid profile in, say, olives or olive oil, it's mostly omega-9s, but about 25% of the fat in olives and olive oil is omega-6 fat, pro-inflammatory, and negligible amounts of omega-3. And if you look at olives, almonds, avocados, macadamia nuts, even though those things are cashews, even though they're high in omega-9s, they're actually still a substantial source of omega-6, hardly have any omega-3s, and people eating those, all those nuts and seeds are typically eating a pro-inflammatory diet.
Wow.
And then sunflower and sesame seeds are especially high in omega-6s. Not that they're all bad, but people can go overboard and be on a pro-inflammatory raw food diet.
Wow, so if you are eating a lot of nuts and seeds, is it possible to balance it out, or should you just not even eat that high quantities of those kinds of foods?
Well, first of all, you don't want to make your diet too high in fat in general. But if you're eating some, I'll give you a classic example. My wife and I like to make dressing at night that has some nuts in it and has some tomatoes in it. So it's concentrated tomato and nuts, and it's kind of like reminds us of lasagna. Because you got like the cheese and the tomato sauce, and we pour it all over a salad. So sometimes we'll take some sesame tahini, high in omega-6s. We'll mix it with a little bit of miso and some lemon juice, and it makes it nice and creamy. That's sort of the nut part. And then we'll make a tomato-based dressing where we take fresh tomatoes, soaked sun-dried tomatoes, sometimes a date or two because dried tomatoes can get a little bit bitter. We'll blend all that up, and then we'll add some chia seeds. And then when we add the chia seeds in there, as a lot of you know who've experimented with flax or chia blended up, it makes the dressing really thick and creamy. So we've got this high omega-3, tomato-based, thick, creamy dressing, and then some omega-6s coming in from the sesame seeds. And sesame seeds are an extraordinary source of iron and calcium and other good things. So there's some pluses and minuses to it. But anyway, that dressing is a good balance of omega-3s and omega-6s. But if we only put the tahini dressing on there and skipped the tomato dressing with chia, it would be too high in omega-6s. And over the long term, we would be creating what they call low-level chronic inflammation. And that damages blood vessels, it makes hormones not work right, it makes our brain not work right. A lot of people think that inflammation is at the root cause of all diseases, every disease. That's clearly an exaggerated statement, but that chronic low-level inflammation is part of the etiology, if you will, for those of you who like medical terms, of many different disease processes. And
wow.
We can reverse that by shifting our diet.
Wow, definitely agree with that, Dr. Rick. So another question is, because these nuts and seeds could mess you up, should I just avoid them and not eat any nuts and seeds?
Again, you don't have to. If you eat some things that are higher in omega-6s and you have some omega-3s to balance them out, that's fine as long as your overall fat intake doesn't get too high. Because besides the whole omega-3, omega-6 thing, when you start getting 40, 50, 60% of your calories from fat, people just start to feel dense and bogged down, and that stuff weighs you down, and you don't get the benefits of a fruit and vegetable-based raw food diet.
So is the moral of the story, you don't want to be fat phobic, but you don't want to eat too much either, and you want to kind of pay attention to the balance.
Right. You want to focus on fresh fruits and vegetables. In order to get enough calories from those, you have to eat huge quantities. A little bit of fat in your diet can make you go from, instead of having to eat this much food in a day to get enough calories, you add a little fat. Well, now you can eat this much food in a day because it's more calorically concentrated. And for a lot of people, that works really well in the real world. Now, for those of you who just want to get the fat just from the fruits and vegetables, you can do that. Some people can do that very successfully if they're willing to eat those larger quantities of food. And a lot of people we know, they're doing great on that. And I wouldn't discourage them from doing that at all. Other people, find different approaches work better for them, including maybe a little bit more fat in their diet.
So we've just talked about omega-3s and omega-6s, but there's other fatty acids such as the DHA and EPA that some people say you can only get from things like fish oils and whatnot, that in my opinion are critically important to brain health and brain development. I mean, I know Udo Erasmus, who studies the essential fats a lot, would even call us fatheads because most of our brain is made up of fats, and maybe if you're not eating enough fat, maybe you might get dumb. What do you say to that, Rick?
There's absolutely something to it. Our brain is made out of a lot of fat. Every cell in our body has a cell membrane around it. It separates the outside of the cell from the inside of the cell. And those cell membranes are made largely out of fat. There's something called a phospholipid bilayer. And the fat that goes in our mouth is the fat that ends up in our cell membranes.
The fat we eat is the fat we wear.
As Dr. McDougall likes to say, we got to give credit where credit's due. And the fat we eat is the fat that not only we wear, but we're made out of. We are what we eat. But not only on the outside, but in our muscles, in our bone cells, in everything, including our brain cells. Now, DHA is a long-chain omega-3 fat. It's got 22 carbons in its chain. It's got 6 double bonds. Those double bonds can conduct a lot of electrical activity. And our brain is very metabolically active tissue. We need DHA for our brain cells to work right. We need DHA for our hormones to work right, because what's going on in the cell membrane, the fatty acid composition of the cell membrane, has a huge influence over how hormones affect the cells. And remembered in school, a tiny little bit of a hormone has a huge effect all over the body. And again, the fat in your cell membranes has a huge effect on how the hormones affect the cells. So it's huge. Now, in our brain, a lot of that fat, like we said, is DHA. But here's the challenge. There is no reliable source of DHA in plant foods. In general, land plant foods for sure. Now, people will tell you that EPA, that's the primary anti-inflammatory omega-3 fat, and DHA, which makes our brain and hormones work right, are only found in fish. And it's true, in a typical modern diet, cold water fish is the major source of those omega-3 fats. And some people even consider those things essential fats, meaning we need them but our body can't make them. And what they do is they look at some scientific studies, and a number of them have been done, where they give people the omega-3 essential fat found in fruits and vegetables and flax, chia, and hemp seeds, and then they see, can the body take that omega-3 essential fat? It's called alpha-linolenic acid. It's got 18 carbons and 3 double bonds, and then through a series of enzymatic reactions, can it turn it into DHA, which has 22 carbons, it's longer, and it has 6 double bonds, twice as many double bonds. And a lot of those studies have shown you give people more ALA, and you don't see more DHA. And so what they say is, okay, you vegans, you people don't have an outside source of DHA, but it's critical for your brain to work right. And the studies show when you give people more ALA, you don't get more DHA. So you have to rely on internal conversion, but it doesn't work. That's what the science says. And that's what's wrong with you vegans. Your brains aren't working right, and you're all screwed up. Now, if they go a little bit below the tip of the iceberg, it's not, very soon in studying essential fats, you come across some of the reasons, and there's one key reason why that conversion process does not work so well. And it's because, going back to the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, people are not in that 4-to-1 to 1-to-1 healthy range. Most people out there are eating like 20 times more omega-6s compared to omega-3s. So I mentioned, you take 18 carbon ALA, the omega-3 essential fat with 3 double bonds, and then you add carbons, you add double bonds, you add carbons, you add double bonds. Eventually you end up with DHA, 22 carbon 6 double bonds. Well, if we were to look at the omega-6 family of fats, we've got the omega-6 essential fat with 18 carbons and 2 double bonds. And then guess what? Enzymes come along. Add carbons, add double bonds, so by the time you get to the end of the chain, you have a fat called DPA, which has 22 carbons and 5 double bonds. It's actually very similar to DHA. So the thing is, the same set of enzymes are responsible for omega-3 and omega-6 conversion. So on a high omega-6 diet, which almost everybody's on, which the people in the studies are on, the enzymes are so busy working on the omega-6s, they don't have the opportunity to work on the omega-3s, and that's why internal conversion to make DHA doesn't work so well. And I've always thought it was interesting. What if we studied a group of people who were on a healthy diet, what I consider and John would consider a healthy diet, who had a healthy ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s, even if they were long-term vegans, 10, 15, 20, 30 years vegan, without ever having an outside source of DHA, in theory, they should be able to convert ALA to DHA. And thus far in my practice, I've had the good fortune of testing about a dozen people. We can actually look at the fatty acid profile in their cell membranes and see if there's enough DHA there, myself and my wife included. And you know what I've found unanimously thus far? We're all in excellent DHA status. And if we don't have an outside source of DHA, the only way it got in there is from internal conversion. So I agree with the studies that if you're your typical junk food vegetarian eating soy ice cream high in omega-6, stir fries with corn oil high in omega-6, potato chips fried in soybean oil high in omega-6 or cottonseed oil, and all that vegan junk food, and they're eating almonds and olive oil to get more omega-6s, and then they're adding coconut oil, which has mostly saturated fat but some more omega-6, and you're not eating tons of fruits and vegetables, flax, chia, hemp seeds. Yes, you're on a high omega-6 diet, you're pro-inflammatory, you don't have enough DHA, your brain doesn't work right. But it doesn't have to be that way when you make healthier choices.
So Dr. Rick, I know there's people say that you can only get the DHA from the fish oil, and as we know, the fish doesn't make the DHA, but it comes from the algae. So what are your thoughts on the algal-based DHAs? I mean, I know this is subverting because we should be eating a healthy diet rich in omega-3 so we can make it ourselves. I mean, we don't need any even algae supplements, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, sometimes, despite people's best efforts, they may not convert ALA into DHA as effectively as one might like. And the hypothetical example I always use in our Science of Raw Food Nutrition classes, which by the way, at our website, you can take our Science of Raw Food Nutrition Level 1 class online and get the whole hour-and-a-half version on essential fats. Give you all the details. Or you can go to our YouTube channel, which you can find on our website, and you can watch a 3-part series on essential fats I gave a few years ago. Okay, so going back to the point here, let's just say hypothetically you are Norwegian or Swedish or most of your genetics are Scandinavian. Traditionally, all of your ancestors had an outside source of cold water fish. That's still major parts of those cultures. So let's just say genetically you couldn't convert ALA into DHA. Big deal! There was no disadvantage survivally because you had plenty of DHA coming in from the outside. So let's just say, despite your best efforts, you don't make enough DHA. Well, as John said, the algae out there in the cold water is the original source of EPA and DHA for the fish. So the little minnows come along and they eat some algae, and then they get the EPA and the DHA from the algae. And then the medium fish come along and eat the minnows, and then they get the EPA and the DHA from the minnows and on up the food chain. So by the time you catch big fish like tuna, they're loaded with that stuff.
It's concentrated, yeah.
But here's the downside. Here's what else gets concentrated.
Yeah.
We've polluted the heck out of our oceans. It's not the fault of the fish, it's our fault. And the fish and the algae are out there in the polluted ocean. Now, if you get some algae, cold water algae with DHA in it, you're also getting some pollution. However, if you eat the fish, you're getting massively more. Because the little minnows, like we were saying, eat the algae, and then they get a lifetime accumulation of mercury and dioxin and PCBs and other environmental contamination. Then the medium fish comes along and eats a minnow. It just got that minnow's lifetime accumulation. And then it eats another minnow and another and another, and thousands of minnows in its lifetime were way, way up in environmental concentration. And then you go a few levels up to tuna. And then what they do is they purify the fish oil. It doesn't mean it's totally pure. It means the level of contamination is brought down to an acceptable level by a government agency or some regulating board. And that's where they always have to weigh out health and industry. Now, it is true if you go to something like krill oil. People like krill oil. They're these little organisms. They're much lower on the food chain, so they have less environmental contamination. But better yet, algae is the lowest on the food chain and the least contaminated, and there are specific products available today that contain EPA and DHA made from cold water algae. So internal conversion is the best, and if despite your best efforts that doesn't work, external EPA and DHA are available from algae sources, so you can stay vegan and get a lot less contamination.
Excellent, Rick. So the next question I have for you is, what about like therapeutic dose of essential fats versus just a normal healthy amount that we should always have? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, by therapeutic dose, I mean, what's the therapy? What's someone?
Oh, so maybe like I've heard many talks at different events I've been to where like then we have the omega-3 doctor expert dude who's like treating somebody with like traumatic brain injury who's like paralyzed, and they talk about mega doses of the DHA, and then the dude could talk again, because we need these fats in our brain to heal.
Okay, well, I can't speak to that directly, although, like we said, our brain is made largely out of DHA. It's one of the most important fats in the cell membranes of our neurons, aka brain cells. So if your brain is trying to regenerate, you need the raw materials that make up your brain cells, including DHA. So that may very well be clinically indicated in that situation. Now, at the same time, though, if somebody's eating a high omega-6 diet, they may need extra DHA to compensate for all the omega-6s. So they might have to fight against that and give people extra that they need in their regenerative process. My guess would be if the omega-6s were lower in the first place, you wouldn't need quite those megadoses.
I see, sure.
And a lot of times, some people say you need like 6 or 8 or 10 grams of omega-3s per day. My general recommendation is 2 grams per day. The dietary reference intake says 1.1 grams for women, 1.6 grams for men. 2 is safe. But sometimes, again, people have to get to those really high levels because they're already eating too many omega-6s, and then they got to really crank up the omega-3s to get back in balance. And I suppose that's fine, but better yet, bring both of them down so you get adequate amounts of both, you get a good ratio, and you're not burdening your body with excessive amounts of fat.
Yeah, I would definitely say nix the 6 is a nice saying. Seriously, most people eat far too many, lower it. Okay,
but that's good.
Nix the 6 meaning just focus on not eating 6s, so you're going to be eating less of them.
And by the way, if you eat only fruits and vegetables and analyzing those fruits and vegetables, you get enough omega-6s. It's not like they're not in there. They are in there.
So I would say, would you agree, Rick, that the problem arises when people start eating the wrong kinds and too many nuts and seeds and not balancing them out?
Because really, the only nuts and seeds, or 2 different seeds that are higher in omega-3s than omega-6s, are flax and chia. Okay, they have more 3s than 6s. Flax 4 times more, chia 3 times more. Hemp seeds, 3-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. That's a good balance in and of themselves. And essentially everything else, all the other nuts and seeds and all the other avocados, substantially more omega-6s compared to omega-3s at varying degrees depending on the food. So yeah, and when people eat a high-fat raw diet, sometimes they don't realize they're doing that, but when they eat significant amount of nuts and seeds, they're usually eating almonds, avocados, olives, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, and they don't realize how many omega-6s they're getting and how out of balance they're becoming.
So I know some of your guys' heads might be spinning right now, like Rick's talking about all these crazy long chain fatty acids, carbon bonds, all this kind of stuff. So now I want to like break it down for you guys in the end. Keep it really simple. So Rick, would it be fair to say if you focus on a diet rich in fresh fruits and fresh vegetables with minimal to no nuts and seeds, you're going to be all right?
Yeah.
On fatty acid balance anyways.
Absolutely, you're going to be great. In fact, again, I've analyzed many diets based on just fruits and vegetables. They get about 2 to 3 grams of omega-3s, which is more than adequate for most people's. A comparable amount of omega-6s, which meets our basic needs, and that's good. And absolutely.
Okay, so we know that'll be pretty good. Now, if you want to get crazy and start partying with a handful of 2 or nuts and seeds a day, like how much flax or chia would you also recommend that somebody eats to counterbalance the potential imbalance you may get?
Oh boy, you know, if it's sesame and sunflower seeds, whatever you have of those, have a comparable amount of flax or chia seeds, roughly speaking. Although don't forget, you can go up to 4 times higher in omega-6s compared to omega-3s. Right. In fact, there's some people out there that consider 4-to-1 the optimum ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. So that's, to me, that's kind of my upper limit. Some researchers believe it's optimal. But if you have some omega-6s, you know, some sesame seeds, you don't have to always balance it out with flax and chia. If you're eating mostly fruits and vegetables, you're getting your omega-3s that way too. But in general, sure, you have some 6s, balance it out with some 3s, get a good mix. You know, make something out of tahini one night, use some chia seeds the next night, sunflower, macadamia one time, use some flax seeds in another recipe. It doesn't all have to be at the same meal or the same day. You know, as long as in a given week you got a good general balance, you're good.
Yeah, I mean, that just pretty much sums it up for you guys. You know, rotate the different nuts and seeds you eat. Always ensure you get some chia and some flax in there, and eat lots of leafy greens. You know, Rick and I would both agree that leafy greens and fruits are a far better source of omega-3s and all the other vitamins, nutrients, phytochemicals, and even fiber and water than, you know, more concentrated nuts and seeds are. Any last words for the viewers out there, Rick?
That sounds good. You don't need fish if you eat a healthy diet, and I have the clinical data to prove it. And in fact, if you want more information and you'd like to actually see some of my patients' case histories, end of August 2014, I'm going to be presenting on omega-3s at the Woodstock Fruit Festival and sharing a lot of my clinical case history and going into some more detail than we talked about here. So if you're excited about that, come hear me and John and tons of other great speakers and have an awesome time.
So the last thing I want to mention is that Dr. Rick also does consulting and can get your essential fatty acids tested. I think this is far more valuable than just knowing what to eat, is to get tested to see where you're at and get Rick to give you his personal advice to you so you can optimize your diet and be the healthiest raw vegan eater you can. So Rick, how can somebody get a hold of you so they can do that?
Yeah, so rawfoodeducation.com, you click on the Lab Work Consulting tab and you'll see information about my consulting service there. And yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, part of how I know all those people are good in DHA is because I have an account with a specialty laboratory that I can send you their kit as well as a slip to a local lab, and the local lab draws the blood, puts it in the kit, sends it off to the specialty lab, and then we can see what the mix of all the different fats that make up your cell membranes is actually made out of. So yeah, what goes into your mouth is a pretty good indicator of what's going to end up in your cell membrane, but we're all a little bit different. So you can actually see your individual in your body omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, how much DHA you have, how many omega-6s, if you're pro-inflammatory, how all this stuff works. Get a good indicator of how different hormones are working in your body so you can actually see what's going on. And that's one of the things I love about lab work. Let's not just look at the nutrient analysis of food. That's useful and that's a good starting point, but lab work can show you what is going on in your body. and it's extremely useful, and it can tell you whether what you're doing is working for you or not, and if you need to change your approach or if you should keep doing the right thing. So I think it's great, and I'm happy to help some of you out there, guide you along the process. For those of you who would like to learn more, there are a few different options. If you go to our website, rawfoodeducation.com, you can access our YouTube channel, and there, near the bottom, if you scroll all the way down, some of the first videos I put up were of an omega-3 essential fat presentation I gave at a vegetarian conference in San Francisco a few years back, where I spell things out and go into some more detail. So another way to get more information is our Science of Raw Food Nutrition Level 1 class is now available online. And in that, you learn all sorts of things about where do you get your protein, calcium, iron, B12, essential fats, acid-alkaline balance, calorie density, blood sugar regulation, all sorts of great stuff that my wife, Dr. Karin Dina, and I teach together. And I've got an hour and a half to hour and 40-minute section there on essential fats, where I spell all this stuff out in more detail and keep it so it's understandable. And if you have more background, all that stuff starts to fall in place and make sense. Additionally, if you join John and speakers like myself this year in the end of August 2014, we're going to be speaking at the Woodstock Fruit Festival in upstate New York. And I'm going to give a presentation specifically on omega-3s there. And included in that, I'm going to show the 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 case histories that I've worked with people thus far of long-term vegans without any outside source of DHA, showing in their cell membranes, in their body specifically, there's lots of DHA and there's lots of EPA. So I'm not just spouting off theory or philosophy, I'm telling you my clinical experience, and I realize that I work with raw food vegans, which are a unique group. I have a unique population set that I work with, and what we see doesn't always look like what the textbooks see, so I'm going to share that with you at the Woodstock Fruit Festival.
Yeah, definitely encourage you guys to come out to the Woodstock Fruit Festival. Besides all the information you're going to learn, you're going to have an awesome time. I'm actually soon to get my blood tested and have Dr. Rick go over it with me and share that with you guys so that you guys could also, because I want you guys to be as healthy as you can on a raw plant-based diet, and not all raw plant-based diets are healthy. You got to dial them in, and you need the feedback that Dr. Rick can provide you with if you utilize his services to do that. So once again, check him out and visit him at rawfoodeducation.com to learn more about him, his services, and also the free information that he provides to you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, learning more about the fatty acids, omega-3s, omega-6s, DHA, and EPA, and you guys now know that you can get enough on a plant-based raw diet if you do it properly. Once again, get tested to know for sure. Once again, my name is John Kohler with OKRaw.com. We'll see you next time, and until then, keep eating your fresh fruits and vegetables. They're always the best. Alright, this is John Kohler with OKRaw.com. Today I have another exciting episode for you, and I'm actually here with Megan Elizabeth, another popular YouTuber. Check her out. She has some awesome videos.